The rain, an almost constant companion in Seattle, slicked the glass of the top-floor office, blurring the cityscape into a wash of gray and neon. James Smith, at 35, didn't look like the man who secretly controlled one of the world's most innovative energy conglomerates. Dressed in a bespoke suit that cost more than most people's annual income, he sat opposite his grandfather, the patriarch, whose voice was now frail but still carried the weight of a billion-dollar legacy. His grandfather, David Miller, a man who had built their empire from a single drilling rig, was nearing his end. The contracts are signed, the acquisition finalized, James stated, his voice devoid of emotion, a tone he reserved for the boardroom. Antoni Wuson, stock is toast. We own every single outstanding share. He's been completely neutralized. David simply coughed, a dry, rattling sound, before motioning to his trusted advisor, Thomas Hodeus, a man of 58 with a meticulously kept silver beard. James, my boy, you've mastered the art of acquisition. You are ruthless, brilliant, and untouchable in this world of finance. But your soul is starved. I fear you're becoming the machine I built, not the man I raised. The words stung, cutting through the usual armor James wore. He had always strived for his grandfather's approval, dedicating his 20s and early 30s to expanding the empire. Yet here, at the peak of his success, he was being told he was fundamentally lacking. David reached out a trembling hand. I have one final request, not as your chairman, but as your grandfather. A promise you must make me. James, never one to break a promise, felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He knew the gravity of this moment. I will do whatever you ask, grandfather, James affirmed, his eyes locking with the old man's. David then laid out his decree. For the next 40 days, James was to disappear. He would travel to a random, small town, not a resort, not a city he knew with nothing but the clothes on his back. No private jets, no credit cards, and most importantly, no Smith name. He was to find work that required sweat and service, not signatures and strategy, and learn to live simply. I want you to see the world from the ground up, not from the top down. James argued, citing the ongoing subtle skirmishes with Anthony Wilson, the corporate rival whose downfall was inevitable but messy. We need to stabilize the Eastern European contracts. Thomas requires my input on the 90 million bond issue. This is not the time for a sabbatical, but David was firm. The company will survive without you for 40 days. If Thomas is half the man I trained him to be, go. Your promise is all that matters. The next morning before the sun rose, James found himself standing alone on a dusty back road outside. Willow Creek, a small town nestled in the foothills of the Cascades, 40 days stretching out before him like a vast, intimidating wilderness. Thomas Rodriguez, having executed the plan with military precision, handed James a worn firefighter uniform, purchased secondhand, and a small, outdated flip phone. It's only contact Thomas's number 401, emergency call only. This is your life now, sir. The Claude Reynaud of your mission is Ryan Walker, a former volunteer firefighter looking for a fresh start. Meanwhile, back in Willow Creek, Mary Smith, 30, was fighting her own battles. Her life was defined by the relentless cycle of raising her daughter, Jessica Sanchez, 7, and keeping the open book, her independent bookstore, afloat. The bookstore wasn't just a business. It was her inheritance, a sanctuary of paper and ink left to her by her late mother, and the only secure thing she had left in the world after the messy emotional abandonment by her ex-husband 3 years prior. Today, the fight was a literal one, a conversation taking place in the dimly lit back office with Michael Brown, the owner of the nationwide bookstore chain Brown & Co., and, inconveniently, the landlord of her building. Michael, a man who saw community only as a market demographic, wanted her lease. Mary, be reasonable. I'm offering you a generous buyout of $55,000. My new book Emporium concept needs this footprint. Your small shop is charming, but it's a dinosaur. You're barely making your monthly rent of $4,000 as it is, Michael sneered, adjusting his expensive tie. Mary clenched her fists, the paper invoices in her hand trembling. This store is not for sale. Michael, it's profitable, it pays my bills, and it's the heartbeat of this town. It's a place where children still discover the magic of reading, something your glorified coffee shop doesn't offer. Michael laughed, a cold, grating sound. Sentiment doesn't pay utilities, Mary, I'll be raising your rent by 20% next month. Pay up, or I'll have your dinosaur shop closed before the summer reading list comes out. He left, leaving behind the acrid scent of expensive cologne and a chilling sense of dread. The injustice of his casual cruelty fueled Mary's resolve. She wouldn't let him take her mother's legacy. James, now Ryan Walker, found his way to the local firehouse. The chief, a grizzled veteran named Jeffrey Lewis, was skeptical but appreciated the humility of a man who just wanted to serve. He couldn't offer Ryan a paid position, as the town budget was stretched thin, but he desperately needed help with maintenance, equipment checks, and especially the community fire safety initiatives that kept the elderly and the children safe. Ryan, despite having never changed a tire in his life, let alone maintained a fire truck, committed to the grueling, unpaid work. He quickly discovered that physical labor was a different kind of exhaustion, one that cleared his mind rather than clouding it. One afternoon, while assisting with a smoke detector battery drive, he found himself outside the open book, captivated by the scent of old paper and coffee drifting out the door. Inside, Mary was attempting to juggle, restocking a shelf of children's books, while also managing the small cash register. A task made nearly impossible by the fact that Jessica, having finished her homework early, was attempting to teach their loyal, but increasingly arthritic shopcat Tolstoy a new, complex handshake maneuver. It was a scene of beautiful, chaotic life that was utterly foreign to James. He noticed a worn ladder, precariously leaning against a high shelf, a potential disaster waiting to happen. "Excuse me, ma'am, that ladder isn't properly secured." "You could seriously injure yourself," Ryan interjected, his voice authoritative but kind, the firefighter persona taken over. Mary, startled, nearly dropped a stack of new releases. "I was in a hurry. The delivery just came." She looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time. He was tall, his uniform was clean but clearly used, and his hands, though strong, moved with a surprising gentleness as he quickly secured the old wooden ladder. "I'm Ryan. I'm helping out down at Station 7. I'm sorry to intrude, but safety is just second nature." Mary felt a faint blush rise to her cheeks. She was used to men like Michael, men in sharp suits who smelled of money and condescension. Ryan smelled faintly of smoke and clean laundry, his eyes holding an intensity that felt honest. "I'm Mary, and this is my daughter, Jessica. Thank you for the rescue, Ryan. The store is already dealing with enough impending disaster without me breaking my leg." He smiled, and the sheer warmth of the expression was a shock. It was the first time in a long time that James had genuinely smiled, without a strategic purpose or a calculated edge. He spent the next hour helping her unload boxers, his quiet efficiency a genuine help. He was surprised by his own satisfaction in the mundane task, the simple reward of easing a burden. Their connection deepened quickly, built on shared service and simple moments. Ryan started coming to the open book almost daily, ostensibly to use their Wi-Fi for research code for checking his emergency flip phone, for a brief text from Thomas confirming the Smith empire hadn't imploded yet, but mostly to be near Mary. He learned about her struggle, the crippling debt from the divorce, her devotion to Jessica, and the constant threat from Michael Brown. He started subtly applying his financial acumen to her situation, albeit disguised as common sense and practical advice. "If you restructure the inventory loans to pay off the utilities first, you could save $3,500 a year in high-interest fees," he suggested one afternoon while wiping down her counter. Mary stared at him, impressed. "Where did you learn all this financial strategy, Ryan?" "I thought you were a firefighter." Ryan improvised quickly, pulling from a lifetime of learned responses. "Just ... a lot of downtime waiting for calls. I read a lot of non-fiction. Plus, my grandmother used to run a small flower shop back east. I learned the hard way about margins and overhead. The IE was easy, but the guilt was a growing weight." He was falling for Mary, a woman of deep integrity, while living a calculated deception. The mounting tension with Michael came to a head when Michael decided to renovate the adjacent storefront he already owned, deliberately creating noise and disruption during Mary's peak Saturday hours, scaring customers away. "He's trying to starve me out." "This is illegal," Mary cried, distraught, watching her mother and her children flee the relentless hammering. Ryan, witnessing the blatant abuse of power, felt a familiar surge of protective fury, the kind he usually channeled into corporate takeovers, but now directed toward a simple, human injustice. "We need leverage, Mary. Something he wants more than this storefront." he stated, his voice low and intense. Mary shook her head. He already owns the entire block. The only thing he doesn't have is wait. The old Carter property. The one with the dilapidated warehouse 2 blocks over? He needs that land to expand his main distribution center. But the Carter family has been holding out for a ridiculous price for years. Ryan's mind, the one that managed global assets, immediately sprang into action. That was his opening. He just needed time to work the problem, time he didn't have, as his 40 days were rapidly approaching their end, and the distance between Ryan Walker, the humble firefighter, and James Smith, the ruthless billionaire, was about to snap. He knew the complex zoning laws and the local tax incentives that made the Carter property invaluable to Michael, and he knew how to move quickly and discreetly. He just needed to find a way to access his real resources without revealing his true identity to Mary, a growing conflict that now consumed him more than the corporate war with Anthony Wilson. The small-town life he had been forced into was slowly breaking down his defenses, leaving him vulnerable to the genuine connection he felt with Mary, a connection his grandfather had always insisted was the true currency of life. He felt the pull of 2 worlds, the one of service and simple love, and the one of power and crushing wealth, and he knew he couldn't keep them separated much longer. His disguise was a necessity for his promise, but a poison for his heart. The next 3 weeks were a blur of escalating conflict and deepening intimacy. Ryan, using his research time, discreetly used the flip phone to contact Thomas Rodriguez, sending coded messages that sounded like casual queries but were in fact complex directives to analyze Willow Creek's property records and the Carter family's financial profile. He masked his intentions under the guise of trying to find Mary a better, more affordable commercial space. The corporate machine of Smith Energy was, unbeknownst to anyone in Willow Creek, dedicating a small, high-powered team to unearthing the Achilles heel of Michael Brown. Meanwhile, in the bookstore, Ryan and Mary were inseparable. They shared late-night coffees, discussing everything from Jessica's latest science project, a surprisingly sophisticated solar-powered wind. Mary's dreams of turning the open book into a literary hub for local artists. She found herself relying on Ryan not just for physical help, like fixing the temperamental water heater or reorganizing the dense history section, but for emotional balance. He listened without judgment, saw her strength without diminishing her struggles, and, most importantly, made Jessica feel completely seen. One Friday night, after closing, Ryan was helping Mary with inventory when the tension, a low hum that had been present since their first meeting, finally broke. Mary, exhausted and frustrated after a day of dealing with Michael's construction noise, leaned against the counter, sighing. It's been so long since I felt that hopeful. You have this incredible sense of stability, Ryan. What do you want? Truly, a life of service. You could do anything, you know. You're too smart to just be a volunteer handyman. Ryan moved toward her, his proximity a silent admission of everything he was holding back. I want simple things, Mary. I want to build something real. Not just a company, but a life where I feel like I matter to the people around me, where my work has tangible good, and I want to be near you. The intensity in his eyes was overwhelming. They kissed, a moment of profound, simple honesty that instantly made the complex web of his secrets feel heavier, more treacherous. It was a commitment made under false pretenses, and the lie tasted like ash. That evening, back at the firehouse, Ryan called Thomas in a state of high alarm. Thomas, I need an exit strategy. The clock is almost out. What's the status on the Carter property? Thomas, always cool, responded with professional detachment. The property is now acquired under a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. It cost $32 million, $6 million over the asking price. It's now the biggest hammer you have against Anthony Wilson. But you must return immediately. Anthony Wilson has successfully petitioned the board to review the initial acquisition documents from 25 days ago claiming fraud in the valuation. If you don't appear in the boardroom in 48 hours, you forfeit the entire deal and lose the leverage needed to secure the next phase of the project. The reality of his other life had finally crashed into Willow Creek. The next morning, Ryan arrived at the open book, his face etched with strain. He had less than 24 hours left in his 40-day promise. He knew he had to leave, but he couldn't just vanish. He saw Mary in the back, tears streaming down her face as she looked at an eviction notice. Michael, in a move of cold-blooded corporate strategy, had found a loophole in the lease and was forcing her out within a week, regardless of the rent increase. He claims the lease forbids unauthorized commercial activity, and he's using the occasional after-hours community reading groups we host as his grounds. She choked out. The unfairness of it all was too much. Ryan felt the billionaire inside him ignite. We fight back, Mary. We open a new store. A bigger one. Your dream of a literary hub, we make it real. He was frantic, desperate to provide a solution before he vanished. Mary looked at him, her eyes weary. With what money, Ryan? I have $3,000 to my name and a mountain of inventory. Ryan knew his disguise was useless now. The solution required his other life. I can help you, Mary. I know people. Investors, ... double quotes. He paused. The words, I am an investor, catching in his throat. Mary, however, misinterpreted his desperate offering. What, Ryan? What are you going to do? Borrow from the fire station's community fund. Steal from your rich grandmother. You've been here 3 weeks, talking about simple living. Where's this grand investor coming from? She felt an old, familiar pain resurfaced, the feeling of being abandoned, the broken promises of her ex-husband echoing in the air. I'm sorry. I can't trust mystery and money, Ryan. I've only just gotten my footing. This is my fight. The door was closing. Ryan, in a flash of desperation, revealed the Carter property. Michael needs that warehouse. It's the key to his distribution center. It's the one thing he doesn't have. And I know how we can acquire it, together turn it into our headquarters, our new open book. He explained, using his real corporate terminology, the strategic value of the lot, how its zoning could be leveraged. Mary listened, astonished by the sheer volume of his knowledge. You sound like a CEO, Ryan. You sound like someone else entirely. Ryan knew the moment was now or never. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old flip phone, his emergency lifeline. I'm calling my contact now. We're going to put in an offer that Michael can't match. Before he could even dial, the phone rang. It was Thomas's voice, a panicked hiss. James, we have a major problem. Anthony Wilson has made an unprecedented move. He's called a press conference claiming the entire Smith's Energy Eastern European contract is based on fabricated energy reserve reports. It's a complete lie. But the market is panicking. The stock has dropped 25% in the last hour. You have to come back now. Ryan, or rather James, stared at the phone, his life falling apart in both worlds. He had made a sacred promise to his grandfather, and now he was being forced to choose between the integrity of his disguise and the survival of the empire David Miller had built. He whispered into the phone, I'm coming, and hung up. He looked at Mary, whose face had gone pale. Who was that, Ryan? And what was that name? James? What are you doing? He tried to explain, stumbling over his words, the complicated story of his father's final wish, the Smith legacy, the 40-day test. But to Mary, it sounded like a convoluted, high-stakes lie, a classic male excuse for disappearing. I have to leave, Mary. Now, I know this looks terrible, but I promise you, I'll fix this. I'll get you the Carter property. I'll be back. Mary backed away, her hands pressed against her mood. Get out. Just ... Get out, Ryan. Or James, or whoever you are. You came into my life, a woman already rebuilding after a huge lie, and you made up a life story, a job, everything. You are no better than Michael Brown. You just use power differently. Go save your empire, but don't you dare come back here. The Ryan Walker I knew never existed. The abandonment felt absolute worse than the divorce because this was a love based on such simple, pure connection. James left Willow Creek that night, an expensive helicopter landing in a nearby field to whisk him away, a jarring contrast to the humble bus ride he had taken in. The transition back to being James Smith was brutal. He was immediately thrust into a high-stakes board meeting, looking haggard and unshaven, while Thomas, still maintaining a professional front, briefed him on the extent of Anthony Wilson's sabotage. The next 5 days were a relentless cycle of damage control, legal maneuvers, and frantic calls to their global partners. James, however, felt disconnected. His mind kept drifting back to Mary, the eviction notice, and the broken promise of a simple life. He was winning the corporate war, eventually silencing Anthony Wilson's claims with irrefutable evidence that secured the Eastern European contract and sent Smith's Energy stock soaring. He authorized the legal team to prepare a deed for the Carter property, arranging for it to be transferred to a new LLC, registered in Mary's name, ensuring that Michael Brown could never touch it. But he knew a property deed wouldn't heal the wound he had inflicted. He needed to face her, man to woman, without the walls of his wealth or the shield of his disguise. He just had to wait for the storm to pass. Before he could finalize his plan to return, Thomas entered his office with a grim look. "Sir, you need to see this." He played a news clip of an apartment fire in Willow Creek, a small tragedy that the local fire station was praised for handling with bravery and speed. The anchor mentioned Chief Jeffrey Lewis and the dedicated volunteer firefighters. But what caught James's attention was a brief, smiling shot of Mary giving an interview outside the bookstore, discussing a Save the Open Book campaign. "She's fighting without you, sir," Thomas stated quietly. "She's leveraging the community. She's stronger than you thought." James felt a fierce pride and a deeper conviction that he needed her in his life. Not just as a love interest, but as an equal. He realized the problem wasn't his wealth, but the secrecy. The time for hiding was over. He needed to be James Smith, the man of integrity and power, and use his true self to win her back. He booked the first private jet back to Willow Creek, not as a returning firefighter, but as the man who had the power to make her dreams a reality. James arrived in Willow Creek, not in a uniform, but in a simple, high-quality cashmere sweater and dark jeans-in outfit that spoke of understated wealth but lacked the formality of his Seattle life. He drove a modest, borrowed luxury SUV instead of his custom armored vehicle. He had to be careful. The town was small, and a man who looked like him, driving a car like this, was an anomaly. His first stop was not the bookstore, but Chief Jeffrey Lewis's office. He handed the stunned chief an official deed, the Carter property, now owned by a nonprofit foundation that would build a state-of-the-art training facility for Station 7, complete with the latest equipment, completely free of charge. "This is from the Ryan Walker Memorial Fund," James explained, a small, wry smile touching his lips. "It's the least I can do for the man I pretended to be. I owe him that much respect." Chief Jeffrey, an honest man who recognized genuine gratitude, simply nodded his eyes wide with disbelief and respect. James then headed to the open book. He found Mary in the middle of a massive community event. The town had rallied around her, organizing a massive book sale to raise money for her legal defense against Michael Brown. Children were performing poetry readings, and a line of people stretched out the door to buy coffee and sign books. It was a beautiful, powerful testament to the community she had fostered. As James pushed through the crowd, he saw Michael Brown watching from across the street, his face a mask of impotent rage. The community was defeating him, but James was about to deliver the knockout blow. He walked straight up to Mary, who stopped mid-sentence, the smile freezing on her face as she saw him. "I'm not leaving until you listen," he stated, his voice calm, resolute, and without a hint of defensiveness. Mary's initial reaction was fury. "You have some nerve. After disappearing with an emergency phone call about your $90 million bond issue, you think a new sweater will fix this?" The crowd around them began to sense the shift in atmosphere and quieted down, observing the tense confrontation. James didn't try to deny his identity. Instead, he simply presented the truth of his emotion. "My name is James Smith. I am a billionaire. I lied because I made a promise to my dying grandfather to live without my name for 40 days, to find out if I was capable of genuine connection outside of my fortune. I didn't come here to deceive you. I came here to fulfill an obligation. But I stayed because of you. The firefighter, Ryan Walker, was an accident. The man who fell in love with you, Mary, the man who cherishes Jessica, that man is me. The truth is, I was going to ask you to partner with me on the Carter property before my corporate life dragged me back. And I did come back." He reached into his coat pocket and placed a single, leather-bound document on the counter. "This is the deed to the Carter warehouse. It's yours, free and clear. The LLC is registered in your name. Michael Brown will never be able to expand his distribution center. This is your new open book, Mary. It's big enough for the literary hub, the local artists, the children's wing you dreamed of. It's not an apology for lying. It's proof that I listened to your dreams when I was Ryan, and I'm fulfilling them now as James." Mary picked up the deed, her hands shaking. $32 million. The sheer scale of the gift and the strategy behind it was breathtaking. It wasn't just money. It was the ultimate protection for her family and her legacy against the injustice of Michael Brown. She looked at the document, then at the man standing before her. He wasn't hiding behind his wealth. He was using his power to serve her dream. The emotional storm inside her warred between the pain of the deception and the overwhelming feeling of being loved, truly and powerfully loved by a man of integrity who had been given an unfair challenge. "You could have told me," she whispered, the hurt in her voice palpable. "You could have trusted me." I fell for a firefighter who fixed things, the billionaire who buys things. "I don't know him." James stepped closer, his own vulnerability exposed. "Then let me show you. The firefighter and the billionaire are the same man, Mary. They both only want to protect what they love. I was wrong to hide it. I was a coward. Forgive the way I entered your life, but don't doubt why I returned Mikhail Brown." Seeing the crowd and the sudden stop in their protest sale, marched across the street, his face crimson. "What is this nonsense? Mary, get your squatter boyfriend out of here. And who the devil are you driving that car and giving out fake deeds?" James turned to face him, the transition from Ryan to James Smith complete. His posture straightened, his voice dropped to the controlled, commanding tone he used in the boardroom, instantly radiating undeniable authority. "My name is James Smith. I am the owner of the company that now holds the debt for every single Brown & Co. property in the state. And as of this morning, I acquired the Carta property. That land is for a non-profit community project, Mr. Brown. Your book, Emporium Expansion, ends today. I suggest you retreat and send your legal team to discuss your overdue payments and the numerous complaints regarding your tenant harassment practices." Michael, recognizing the name Smith and the sheer corporate weight behind it, recoiled as if struck. The casual, powerful destruction of his entire strategy was absolute. He left in humiliated silence. The community erupts in cheers. In the midst of the celebration, Mary pulled James aside. The pain hadn't vanished, but the love had won. "I believe you," she said, finally. "Not because of the deed, but because the man standing here is the same man who fixed Jessica's bicycle. The only difference is the scale of what you can fix." James reached for her hand, his thumb gently tracing her knuckles. "I'm still a firefighter, Mary, but now I have a much bigger hose. The test is over. My promise to my grandfather is fulfilled. The lesson I learned is that the most valuable asset I'll ever own is not a billion-dollar company, but the simple, true life I found here with you. Tell us in the comments, which city are you watching this story from? We love connecting with our audience all around the world.